Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
Practically no one will watch this program today, although you will all have recorded it, because you'll all be watching the royal wedding.
Or so, at least, a visitor from Venus would conclude if they scanned the British media.
As a matter of fact, I, wholly uninterested in royal matters, am interested in this royal wedding, bringing, as it does, a touch of colour into a rather grey royal family. It is becoming, though, like one of those soap operas.
Or maybe the British telenovela, complete with paparazzi and book deals, sisters falling out, dreadlocks at the House of Windsor, it might be called. Turns out Princess Meghan has a family tree even more tangled than Prince Harry.
It's a bonanza for royal aficionados and commentators, the doyen of which joins us now. He's James Brookes, royal correspondent and Director of Broadcasting and Communication for Royal Central, the world's leading news site on everything British royalty. James, welcome to the Sputnik. How does a young man like you end up in a place like this?
Well, it's been 5 years and counting so far. It's been a quick 5 years and a very busy 5 years. But yeah, I started out. I saw a job at the palace was going to be a footman for the Royals, and at the time I was going down to London to study for my undergrad degree in journalism, and I thought, well, it sounds like a good job. Let's apply, see what comes of it. Put it to the back of my mind, and then a few weeks later, I was invited down to actually go and interview for this job, and it was the in the palace itself. Really kind of heavy, packed out day of doing lots of different things. You had to be able to mingle with different people. You had to show that you could...
As in holding a tray.
As in holding a tray, you had to... I remember the one thing that we had to do, we had a job, we were given a situation. So an army general was meeting with the Queen, and he was going to a reception later on that evening. Obviously, meeting the Queen, he'd be in full uniform, and he needed to get changed really quickly to be able to shoot off to this this dinner. And yeah, we had to be sure that his lounge suit, so similar to what I'm wearing now, would be ready for him to just go and get into. So we had to make sure that everything from the belt was in the belt buckles the right way around, the cufflinks in the shirt, and boxing socks was something I'd never come across before.
Boxing socks?
Boxing socks. Not quite, I wish they were, but you had to make sure that the socks were folded on the top of the shoes, so that you could, in essence, just pull the socks onto your feet. And you don't have to worry about, getting them out of thing.
Of course, that's a big worry for men.
Absolutely, and when you've got time, when you've only got 5 minutes, pulling your socks up, it takes a long time. So, but yeah, no, I didn't.
Did you pass that with flying colours?
I didn't pass. The only thing I got wrong, I was told, was I put the belt around the wrong way in the belt loops, so I didn't get the job, and
so
potentially that is why. Yeah? And yeah, but it gave me an insight into life behind the palace doors, and
an insight into the absurdity of it, as well as the majesty of it.
It's theatre. It's one of those things that everybody wants to know what goes on behind those gates.
Yeah, it's the longest running show in the West End.
There you are.
Now, you've chosen the right 5 years, because what a bonanza it has been. But this royal wedding today is the tops, isn't it? The cherry on the top of the cake.
It is, and this week has been absolutely packed with drama from all sides of the family, really. We've had Harry and Meghan kind of had this royal bombshell dropped on them, because we now know that Meghan's dad not going to the wedding, and it's one of those
the
things.
Sisters writing
writing a book.
Paparazzi deals.
Absolutely, we've got Thomas Markle Jr., her half brother, writing that Prince Harry should call off the whole wedding and shouldn't marry. Days later, he's saying, actually, I know I've said lots of nasty things about you, Meghan, but we're still family. Can I have an invite to the wedding anyway? Yeah, it's been a real drama of a week, but it's been an interesting one. And I think the one thing that a lot of people will kind of want to take from this is that Harry and Meghan, it is their wedding day still, and it's one of the most important days of anybody's life, their wedding, and they'll want to look back at it with fond memories, but they'll also want to be sure that the media and the kind of crowds around the world, because it's got huge media interest, will get the show that they've been waiting for. And it's one thing that we do quite well as a country, is the pomp and the ceremony and the tradition. So I think it will be something that goes down in the history books, and hopefully it'll be something that, as say, Harry and Meghan in years to come can think, yeah, we did a good job.
Obviously, all the paparazzi is part of it, but I am a bit surprised that, you know, these deals and all the sister coming out, talking against her. Could all of this not have been avoided?
Could they not have sent someone like you to go and mind the Markles?
I don't know how much I would have been able to help with the situation, but
protocols,
a striped, bowler-hatted palace official or a retired Fleet Street newspaper editor to go there, it would have been worth the money and mind the whole menage, so that it didn't become really a rather tawdry show or novella.
It's one of those things that Kensington Palace this week have been criticised quite heavily for almost letting the ball drop right at the last second, because up until kind of this week, really, we've seen the palace drip feed us bits of information about the flowers, the cake, the music, who's going to be page boys, bridesmaids, etc. And the one thing that a lot of people are saying is that why was Thomas Markle not given the support media-wise before this all kicked off?
Have they not met before either, or
they've not? No. Correct? So this would be
this would not be possible in my culture.
Tradition. I mean, you're talking about tradition.
Yeah.
It is the tradition of every man in this building asks the father of his intended for her hand. In this case, Prince Harry hasn't even met her father.
Is
that not weird?
Yeah. It is a bit strange. I think he did ask for permission. It's understood he did it over the phone. It is one of those things. A lot of people have been saying, well, why didn't Harry go out and meet him to prepare him for the fact that he is going to have an uphill climb in the lead up to the wedding? And unfortunately, I mean, we've heard that he's had, or supposedly been in hospital having heart surgery, supposedly had a heart attack because of all the pressure that he's been under in the run-up to the wedding. And if he thinks that the media attention is going to go away, even though he's not at the wedding and he's not going to be involved, unfortunately, I think he's got a bit of a shock, because now that Meghan's coming into the royal fold, that's it. Media attention will be on her entire family, just as it was for Kate when she married William.
And for Diana, which I'm seeing a lot of eerie echoes of what happened to Diana now potentially happening to Meghan. Now, I think she's fantastic, breath of fresh air, black, an actress, beautiful, and so on. A lot of the British press coverage, especially in right-wing royalist newspapers like the Mail Group, for example, it's really snobbery, isn't it? It's really reflecting the fact that, like Anne Widdecombe famously on Big Brother or wherever she was, Love Island, maybe, that this black, commoner American family are really cheapening the royal brand. Isn't that really what lies behind a lot of the scarcely veiled hostility.
There's a lot. There has been a lot of hostility, and it's one of the things that Harry has already called out quite early on. And he wanted to make sure that Meghan was actually welcomed into the family, and she felt comfortable marrying him, because we've seen from his previous relationships that the reason that he's not settled down before now is because the women and the girls that he's previously been linked with are aware of what it means to be marrying into the royal family, and Harry wanted to be sure that Meghan knew that from the get-go. And a lot of people, a lot of the press, giving her a hard time in the lead up. I personally think it's a fab moment for the royal family to be able to kind of just take stock.
It's certainly
and
very
just
21st
reset.
century, isn't it? We're big fans of the American sitcom Modern Family, and this is a truly modern match, isn't it?
It is. It's one of the things. I was in Nottingham when they announced they were to get married, and they were going down to do their first engagement after that. And you just saw the connection that they had with the crowds that were there. So there were groups of school kids lined up, and they were going down, just having a chat. Harry just talking about normal things that you would to any, I don't know, 13, 14-year-old. What are you doing this weekend? Are you playing football? What are you up to? It's the one thing that I think a lot of people find relatable about Harry and Meghan, and to some extent William and Kate, although William and Kate, a little bit more pressure because William knows he's going to be king. Yeah. Harry knows that he's got a little bit more weight off his shoulders because he's not. But they are relatable compared to the likes of the Queen, Prince Philip, Charles, Camilla. But having said that, that's what they need. They need to know that in 10, 15, 20 years' time, if the monarchy is to survive, it needs to modernise, it needs to change with times, and if it doesn't, they run into issues.
You were quite lucky that you didn't get that job as a footman, because you're a much better royal commentator. Last question, briefly. You better make the most of this, because it'll be a long time before there's an occasion as big as this. I mean, what's the next one after this?
Well, we obviously have Princess Eugenie's wedding in October. It's not going to be as big as this one.
Not in the same league, no.
Chances are, in
That's
terms
Conference
of,
League.
It is, yeah. It will still have media coverage. It will, chances are, still obviously make newspapers and headlines around the world, but not to the same extent. In terms of big weddings, probably Prince George, I would have said.
Who's aged what now, 4?
Oh, going on 20 years if we...
Same age as our son. We're not yet planning his wedding.
To go. It's one of those things that we'll have a long time to wait, and that's why this wedding has so much significance at the minute. A lot of people waiting, and if they've been royal fans for years, they want to make the most of it before they...
well, you make the most of it too. Make it while the sun shines. Thanks very much, James, for joining us.
Coming up next, we'll be talking Turkey. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Sputnik. Britain historically propped up Turkish sultans in the great game of the 19th century, even fighting a war with Russia in the Crimea to do so. With the collapse of the caliphate at the end of World War I, the British adjusted easily to the era of the secular caliph Ataturk, even more easily with his dictatorial successors, embracing Turkish membership of NATO. The rise of an Islamist sultan in the form of Erdogan has been more of a challenge. Turkey's current position as an ally of Russia and Iran, a rival to Saudi Arabia, and a disruptor of NATO's relationship with Israel has made things even more complicated. So President Erdogan's appearance this week behind the sublime port at Buckingham Palace would have made for the most fascinating fly-on-the-wall documentary. Joining us to untangle the knots is Turkey expert and director at Eurasia Future, Adam Garrie. Adam, welcome to the Sputnik. First of all,
to be here.
The Erdogan state visit passed off almost without notice. Was it therefore of no significance, or was it perhaps secretly a matter of some significance?
Well, I think the truth is somewhere in between. It was when you combine a country like Turkey that's always been significant, and particularly for Britain, because it was Turkey which was the hinge upon which the British could screw, and the more that screw was turned in, Turkey could and did provoke wars with Russia. It was always, not just in the Crimean War, but throughout the 19th century, the Western European imperialist powers that were provoking Russia and Turkey to fight wars. Now things are a bit different because you've got Turkey that's allied with Russia for the first time in history. And it was a long way coming in many ways. You've got to remember that in 1936, Ataturk agreed to the Montreux Convention, which said that the Turkish Straits are Turkey, because after the First World War, the Western victorious allies wanted to internationalize them. Ataturk, who always had a good relationship with his fellow revolutionary counterpart of a different kind, Lenin, he made good on that promise to say, yes, they are Turkey, but any country who's got a navy in the Black Sea will have permanent access in both peacetime and wartime. So Turkey is obviously incredibly powerful, and under Erdogan, you've really got in Turkey a leader that's more powerful than any leader since Ataturk, and certainly more powerful than the last few sultans. In Britain, you've got a country that's looking for its identity. Erdogan was very much reshaping the identity of Turkey when he came in. I call him a Turkish nationalist with Ottoman and Islamic characteristics. Britain now doesn't know if it's European or not, doesn't know if it wants to be Donald Trump's friend or his opponent, certainly when it comes to things like Iran. And so it would be difficult for the simplistic mainstream media to really spin a pro-British positive story about the meeting. So they've ignored it.
How sultan-like is Erdogan? Obviously wins elections. There was a time when he was unchallengeable. Turkey's economy was growing faster than China. There was an internal peace process with the Kurdish minority, and Turkey had a policy of no quarrels with the neighbors. Then there was a period in which war resumed inside Turkey, and Turkey had quarrels with all of its neighbors. So Erdogan's quite a flexible friend, isn't he? How do you know that his current posture will last?
Well, Erdogan has very much matured since he first came to power. And when he first came to power, frankly, as someone who admires Ataturk very much, I was skeptical. But Erdogan's record of being able to pivot interests between West and East in this win-win formula that we hear so much about, to coin the phrase from Chinese President Xi Jinping, it's really worked out to the best interests of Turkey. And insofar as he's popular, he's strong, and he has a low threshold for abuse from opponents, let alone from terrorist groups like FETÖ or the PKK or indeed Daesh, one can call him a sultan, but only in the same way that any powerful leader could be associated with such an epithet. One of the reasons you'll never hear Merkel being called a Kaiser or May being called some sort of empress is because they're not very popular and as a result not very powerful. So Erdogan, it's funny, in some ways he's a victim of his own success. I still think that in this forthcoming election he's going to win and win quite comfortably, and this of course
Although
will
he's
give him
currently less than 50% in the polls, which would force a second ballot.
Indeed. I tend not to believe opinion polls. I think that it's difficult to predict these things. I think even if it goes to a second round, he'll be in a fairly confident position. And the reason I say he's a victim of his own success is the following. When he came to power, the economy was in tatters. You had the typical, stereotypical, if you will, South Mediterranean, West Eurasian economic malaise. He changed that by pumping in investment into major cities, into rural areas. He was much friendlier to small businesses, and Turkey's generally a very small business, merchant-friendly culture. He unleashed some of the bureaucratic restraints on them, and he was popular. Now that the cities are very clean, they're very vibrant, a lot of them are saying, well, we're going to go back to our CHP HDP Kemalist roots, and we're going to abandon Erdogan for ideological reasons, even though economically he's done well. And just a little asterisk I put next to that, we've been hearing a lot very recently about the lira, which has been, it's been in fairly bad shape, but this is fitting with the classic Keynesian model of when you've got employment going up, productivity going up, overall economic growth going up, you're going to have inflation. So a weak currency is only really dangerous if you've got stagflation. So the Philippines, another example of one of the quickest, fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia, but the peso very weak. So long as employment and wages are up and the economy is growing, Turkey, like the Philippines, will be able to withstand that.
Now, it's only a couple of years ago, maybe less, that the Turkish Air Force was shooting Russian airplanes out of the sky, and a real crisis existed between Russia and Turkey, and Russia took economic measures against Erdogan's government. Now they seem to be on the same wavelength, not quite the same wavelength, but at least an overlap vis-a-vis Iran and vis-a-vis the need to defeat the Islamist extremist threat in Syria. But Erdogan is himself an Islamist. He is a part of, you could say he's the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood's International. So to what extent do you think Russia can rely upon such an ally?
I think, first of all, we need to remember that while in the fog of war, everyone thought that the order to shoot down the Russian jet, which was undoubtedly a crime, came from the top, subsequent investigative reporting from very serious Turkish journalists, and it's been reprinted in Russia, indicate that it was a calculated conspiracy among officers and even the airmen involved who were loyal not to the Turkish state, but to FETÖ, the Fethullah terrorist organization of a man who's living in the United States and whose organization is funded covertly by the US.
Living a couple of miles from the CIA.
How convenient. He doesn't even need a Boris bike. So, so Gulen is, I believe, and many in Turkey and many in Russia believe, responsible for that outrageous provocation. Since then, Turkey and Syria have not only reconciled, but Russia and Turkey, Putin and Erdogan recently cut the ribbon for Turkey's first ever nuclear power station that Russia's going to build. The Turk Stream 2 pipeline is progressing at a very healthy rate. And in Syria, while this wasn't true 2 years ago, I would say that Russia and Turkey now have more in common than Russia in Iran, because Iran wants to finish the war, follow it through to its logical conclusion, and frankly its ethical conclusion, in terms of trying to push for the liberation of the occupied Golan Heights and to eradicate all of these terrorist groups militarily. Russia wants to wind things down and kickstart the political process, allowing it to generally supplant the military process. Turkey tends to take that same view as well, and has been much more vocal as part of the very important triumvirate of the Astana partners, Turkey, Russia, and Iran, which have been working to bring peace to Syria. So Turkey and Russia, of course, they have healthy disagreements, as any healthy partnership does, where both sides respect each other, but they have more in common now than almost any other partnership in the wider region, which can only be a good thing, because it means, unlike what Britain and France used to do in provoking wars between Russia and Turkey and between Russia and Iran, now all three, despite disagreements, are together.
The tectonic plates are definitely shifting. How stable they will be after this shift remains to be seen. Britain supported Turkish membership of the EU that we are now leaving, and seems still to do so. What are the prospects of Turkey joining the European Union?
Very little. I would say next to none. It's unpracticable, and the actual members of the EU have never really wanted it, and now they want less. This, though, again, is part of Britain's identity crisis. The other day, there was a summit hosted by Britain saying why the West Balkan nations, Serbia, Albania, Montenegro, should join the EU, which is a bit like an arsonist saying that you should join the fire brigade. It doesn't really make sense. Certainly the optics, as they say, are a bit funny, but I think Turkey's position is solidified now. It's a country that can look both ways from a position of strength. And the prime example I'd give of this, the United States tried to tell Turkey, we will sanction you if you buy the S-400 missile defense systems from Russia, and will withhold our delivery of the F-35 jets. Turkey said, no, you cannot treat us this way. And guess what? They're getting the American jets and they're getting the Russian missile defense systems. That's win-win.
Win-win indeed. Adam Garrie, thanks for joining us on board the Sputnik. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Right, so we asked our audience how excited they are about the royal wedding today. And Frank Booth says, robbing the wealth they have in our faces and being subsidized by us peasants in a time of austerity, #stinks, #let them eat cake. And Mark Andrew, I will be wondering why as a country, having spent $300,000 on a dress, there are people sleeping on the streets. And finally, Guak says, well, I got them a $20 gift card from Walmart.
That'll go towards the buying of the wedding dress. I don't think these arguments really add up, because actually the British economy will be a net beneficiary from this wedding in a very big way. From tourism, from merchandise and all of that. It's big, big business.
And in a sense, it is revolutionary. Looking at Meghan Markle.
Yeah.
Black.
A black woman in a white wedding dress costing $300,000. A divorcee, I'd forgotten that. A Catholic.
There you go.
Although she had to
Convert
is the word I'm looking for.
Well, that's all the time we've got for the tweets today.
Alas means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on our social media, on Twitter and Instagram, RT_Sputnik, and on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.